All right, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Kendrickus Weldon, and today I have Jaden Jones here with me today.
Hey, how's it going?
It's going great, sir. And today, my presentation focuses on the gay liberation movement, which is a precursor of Stonewall Inn. And historically, Stonewall Inn took place on June 27, 1969, in Manhattan, New York. And basically, Stonewall Inn basically existed because society didn't accept men for who they were. Accept homosexual couples for who they were, or they didn't allow them to express themselves freely, which is why they migrated to a private bar, in this case, Stonewall Inn, to express themselves freely. And because being homosexual wasn't a society norm and expectation, the government and political authorities, such as the police, raided the gay bar, and they found every excuse. They found the excuse, which was the prohibition of selling. Well, the inability to sell liquor. So basically, they were selling liquor inside the bars, and the police basically found an excuse to separate the sexual movement, or separate homosexual individuals. And here,
so that was the reason why they raided the bar?
Because
of liquor?
Because of liquor. So they basically,
wow.
Right. Which is...
They needed a reason to actually go in and implement what they was trying to do.
Right. Which is, we already know that's cruel, because of course they're not allowing them to express themselves freely. And they they are using their force to separate this group. And we already know that causes a lot of psychological factors, and that's what they wanted, to induce fear in them and make them submissive. But the LGBTQ members, during the time was called the LGBTQ members, the homosexual individuals, the police basically, I'm trying to find a word. So they basically went into the bar, and the police forced all the homosexual individuals out, and the LGBTQ member, or the homosexual individuals, retaliated and raided the gay bar while the police was in there. And this basically paved the way for the new gay liberation movements to come in the future. So that was basically, and this took place, the raiding took place within 6 days, as we will see here.
Wow.
The gay liberationists, they made their voice heard, which I basically mentioned in the previous slides, and they took advantage of the political events around the world. So they basically used their voice to gain recognition from other movements to make a change sexually. And as I mentioned, they reached closeted homosexuals and radicalists, and then which they message traveled quickly and spread it with amazing rapidity. So basically,
so when they say they reach closeted homosexuals, that means like they encourage them to actually have a voice as well.
Yeah.
Okay, gotcha.
So, okay. Because if you because basically if you closeted, then of course that means that you're not confident in your sexuality, and the reason that they're not the reason that they're not confident in their sexuality is because of society norms and expectations. The government said it is abnormal for homosexual men and women to be gay, and then society, that's going to induce a lot of fear in society, and it's going to cause the stigma.
Right.
Basically, there's a stigma when some, you know what stigma means, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, so it caused this stigma in society, whereas a lot of people feel you as crazy, or or in this case, gay. And when you're gay, they don't want to be near you. So it induces fear within society. And so because this was like a radicalist movement who wanted social justice, social, let's say social and social and sexual justice, pretty much. Oh, excuse me. And that's how they reached the class of individuals. Basically change their perception of, them expressing themselves freely. And then, of course, when a movement formulates, or when a movement constructed, you gain attention in the media, of course.
Right.
And
Yep.
this goes back to the first bullet point, where they made their voice heard. And then when you make your voice heard and you have a purpose and direction, the message travel quickly and spread with amazing rapidity. And there it go. You remember we was talking about the New Left? There it go, classified themselves as the New Left. You had the conservatives and the radicalists. In this case, they were radical thinkers. So they basically didn't believe in traditional thinking, of course. So they was anti-government. And as I mentioned, they fought for social equality and gay rights. And then this also paved the way for the LGBTQ movement. And this movement, as I mentioned, gained recognition around the world. And as time progressed, the movement basically, like numerous states and countries around the world had their own gay event day. I think Gay Pride for us is in June. So gay event day occurred in numerous of cities because of gay liberationists expressing their voice and identity, using their right, and using their willpower in the right direction. So
how did the media portray them to the world? Like, was it in a good manner or was it in a bad manner? Like,
now that right there is a great question, but because you have different sources, so that is a great question. But me thinking critically, I can answer this because we actually talked about this in my political science course. Now, of course, as I mentioned, this is a group where where being homosexual was considered a social disorder. And what I mean by social disorder is that, again, it doesn't align with society norms and expectations. So, of course, you had the media was perceiving the the gay liberation movement as illegal, or of course inequitable. I hope that answered your question.
Sure.
Did it answer your question?
Yes, it do.
Because their whole goal was for them to not yield change. They dehumanized the homosexual individuals, so they didn't want them to yield change.
And then they also classified being homosexual as a mental illness.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So yeah, there you go. Now that goes to my point. I think that covers my next slide on why is the gay liberation movement essential or important. Of course, it fought to end the legislation systems, prejudice and discriminatory behavior. So this kind of answers your question on how they were portrayed in the media, because it's hard to amend it's hard to amend or make change politically, and We basically touched
Yeah.
on these issues like in previous conversations that we had. So
Exactly.
Congress, remember, is Congress really the ones that make the decision, and it's hard because it's hard to make change. So they fought for equality systematically and individually, and some of these are just kind of self-explanatory and bullet points that I explained in previous slides. And they help others express their true identity and voice. They brought change to other movements because as the gay liberationist, movements was formulated around the 60s, you also had other small movements as well. That they pretty much, of course, as I mentioned in the previous slides, co-joined with to create this bigger voice to make change, which we see here. So you have different when you have movements and protesters with their movements, it can kind of be inflexible because of those other movements, and
Right.
you have different and these are radicalist thinkers, as I mentioned before, and you basically have different people looking at things from different perspectives to attack the legislation system. So they were unafraid to spread their message. So, like the Black Panther Party, which is a group that we talked about this semester, a bold, fierce group that wasn't scared to attack the government. This was the same with the gay liberationist movement. They fought hard for equality. And there we go. They linked with other political organizations and movements, the Civil Rights Movement and Black Panther Party. Look at me hitting on these bullet points. I love it. But yeah, they linked with other political organizations and movements to yield change. And when a lot of people think about the Civil Rights Movement, they automatically think, Martin Luther King or
Rosa Parks.
Rosa
people
Parks,
like that.
yeah, the SNCC.
Right.
I think it's SEC. Yeah, I mean they think of stuff like this, but with you had different organizations within that movement. So it ignited a new atmosphere for new gay liberationist movements and communities, which we see today, the LGBTQ community, which is a precursor of the gay liberation movement. And here comes this also answer a part of your question. So journal article, music, films, magazines express the cultural experience of LGBTQ community. So as the government began to add their perspective or express their perspective on the LGBTQ community, you of course when you have a protest or when you have protesters, you also have an audience, and when that movement gains public attraction, like musicians, they're political in a sense because they have numerous of followers. So they basically they gain those types of followers like celebrities, which we want to see Diana Ross.
So it kind of forced the government to change their perspective and actually start making a change for the movement because, like you said, the movement was gaining traction around the world. So the government was kind of like forced in a way to bring change and actually, bring equality to the homosexual community.
Yes.
Gotcha.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole point of protesting. You protesting to make your voice heard, and in order to make your voice heard, you want the government to hear it, so that you can gain. You want the government to hear your voice, and when your voice is heard, they see that you're serious. They take it serious, and they make change. So yeah. And lastly, psychiatric remove homosexuality from list of mental disorders, so which we talked about, which you basically touched on at the beginning of this presentation. And then it also paved the way for the lesbian and feminist movement. So basically, living in a patriarchal society where man was dominant, women basically formulated their own movements to, or they did, yeah, they distanced themselves from man to explore the systemic issues that pertain or related to women, which goes to the second bullet point. They explored their oppression together. And feminist movement came to a self-definition of lesbians, and also during this time you just had the feminist movement, or you had something called feminism. You familiar with feminism?
Yes, I am.
Okay, yeah. So you had
that's very popular right now in
today's
world.
Agreed. Yep. Had the feminism movement, black woman empowerment, basically educating women about the importance of the body, and you know the importance of using their voice, because women were seen as inferior in society. Always have been seen as inferior.
Right.
So yeah, and this why I say, like, with the feminists or with the feminist movement, this why I basically get, like, your body is sacred, because this is what the feminist movement preached. So yeah. Women relating to other women created a new conscience. It created a new way of thinking. And you even had women that came from the heterosexual world to join the lesbian feminist movement, and add in their interpretation on on how lesbians were perceived. And then it served as a bridge between gay liberation and women's movement, which I talked about at the beginning of this slide, and then it attacked traditional sex roles. So, like men and women, like heterosexual, right. Heterosexual relationships. It attacked those traditional sex roles. How it goes back to my point on saying women as inferior. They didn't, they start women empowerment. They didn't see themselves, in this case, as inferior. They saw themselves as superior. They saw themselves as queens, as having a voice, as worthy, etc.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And then the LGBTQIA community struggles that share ties to the past. Homosexual citizens face unequal treatment systematically. So the problems that we see today in the LGBTQ community is rooted within its past. So we still see policies in the workplace that discriminate against LGBTQ community. We also see this in the public schooling system, for instance, where I know I did a project in this class where I talked about how how the government is not passing, like, LGBTQ curriculum because they don't want the students to absorb that information. So yeah, people of color and transgender. Yeah. So yeah, they didn't want the curriculum to flourish within the school, and they also didn't want like gay teachers teaching their students. So
that's a great point, because I think I never had a homosexual teacher.
Yeah.
Ever, like, in my life.
Yeah.
So.
And they feel as if they're going to indoctrinate them, like program them to think, or program them to be homosexual, which is weird.
Right.
So, people of color, of course, and transgenders are more impacted. People of color, of course, are minority. minority been facing systemic issues ever since the existence of 13 colonies. So,
Indeed, for
yeah.
sure.
And of course, transgenders are more impacted because of just their appearance, which has a huge impact on their psychological well-being. And it impacts where there it goes. Impacts citizens' economic and psychological well-being, and Black communities stigmatize African American LGBTQ citizens, which goes back to my point at the beginning of the slides where we say, "Oh, he gay. I don't want to be friends with him. I don't want to be near him." You know, and it damages you psychologically, and it
Right.
causes society not to. It causes you not to accept yourself. So it tarnishes your mental well-being, and it also, you know, it prevents acceptance. You know, so
Which is traumatizing.
yeah, literally, yeah, I agree. And then many now, back then we saw that the liberation movement allowed or built this foundation for closeted individuals to express their voice, but today we see that the political systems you know, warrant the war again because many closeted individuals can't express themselves freely. And then
Right.
we have an inadequate amount of access to healthcare, which ties back to the Black community, which ties back to the Black community. So that goes in terms of getting tested. Excuse me. That goes in terms of them getting tested. You know, being able to get tested and kind of provide for their physical well-being. So if they can't get tested, it leads to stuff like, of course, STDs and things of that nature.
Wow.
And then you had, which goes back to my point at the beginning of the slide, the LGBTQ pride song, Diana Ross. I'm coming out. Let's take a minute and let's take a
It's a
minute.
very popular song.
Yeah, let's take a minute and take 2 seconds and listen to it. Because this video is 22 minutes, so. Okay, it's really not gonna let me listen to it, but well, you can hear it, but it's low. But due to the sake of time, I'm gonna skip the song. And that's how I'm coming out, and it was created for the LGBTQ community to disclose their sexual orientation. So she helped these individuals to come out, these closeted individuals to come out and express themselves freely. Once again. And then
that's so powerful because I never knew that's what that song actually meant. So definitely thanks for sharing that because I didn't know that song was meant to actually empower the homosexual community.
Likewise, so. And you want to know what's funny? I remember I was just singing the song so freely at Allied Universal with Misha, and Misha was like, "Don't you know that song is for like LGBTQ people in the LGBTQ community coming out about their sexuality?" And I said, "I never knew that." So I'm glad that you brought that up. And then of course we can find ways to help as a solution. And to attack the political system's agenda, we can find ways to help the LGBTQ community use their voice by, you know, you can find stuff around the house, anything that help you heal the LGBTQ community. Here's my example. I have this pen, Equality for Homosexuals, Peace, and Hope and Peace. This blog. This peace blog and this banner that says hope and peace. And that concludes the end of my slideshow. Thank you so much, Mr. Jones, for engaging thoroughly and asking questions about the gay liberation movement. I hope you learned and gained a lot of useful information that can help you on your journey.
Thank you as well. Like I learned a lot. A lot of valuable information and a lot of empowering information as well.
I am so glad to hear that. Yeah, I am so glad to hear that.
For sure.
That's the end.